Today, I'm going to show you how we're spending $10,000 a day in our testing campaign in order to find new winners and scale them in a way more predictable format. And this is proof that we're doing this right now. This is just one of our testing or the testing campaign that we're spending $10,000 or more per day consistently to find winners and scale them. And so this is what happens with most testing processes, right? There's no systematic testing process of variables that are predictable. But assuming you have that down, it's hard to find small winners at the $1,000 to $2,000 in spend level. But then after that, once you do find those winners, it's hard to really scale them up. So you're spending $10,000 to $100,000 a month on that specific concept or that creative. And so that concept or that ad could work at the ABO or a small level in terms of spend, but then it doesn't scale in that setup or when you move it to scaling campaigns. And then it's hard to increase budgets relatively quickly. And so this is the new testing process that allows you to test systematically with minimums, which I'm going to walk through. Easy to find winners and clear losers so you know how to make decisions. Easier to find bigger winners that are spending $10,000 to $100,000 a month on the ad, and easier to scale when things are working. And so we call it the CBO split and scale. And what that means is that we have a CBO campaign. The budget is 10x your target CPA. And I'm going to give you an example here. You can start with 5 ad sets, and your minimum spend at the ad set level is 2x CPA. And then there's 4 ads inside of each ad set. And so let's do an actual example here. The example is if you have a $100 CPA, your campaign budget would be $1,000 per day. Your ad set, at each ad set, there's an ad set minimum of $200 per day. And then you have individual ads underneath. And the way that we look at it, we call them concepts. A concept is an idea for an ad. And underneath that, there might be variations of hooks or different messaging that you might want to test that looks relatively the same, where there's only one variable that's being changed. And so this is the method that we're using. And what happens when you launch this is that there's a series of decisions that happen, right? Like any testing process that you have, once you launch it, there's a series of decisions you can make. So one is that you scale the budget. And so sounds obvious, but there's different nuances here of what to consider. When you have winning ad sets in here, what you're able to do is if you have 5 ad sets with the $200 a day minimum spend, it forces that $200 a day. But then when you see that it's working and you want to scale up to $5,000 per day, what happens is that the $1,000 a day of spend, because of the minimums, is spent on the individual ad sets. And then Meta decides where to spend the rest of the $4,000 day. And in this format, it's been way more successful for us as we've added budget to where Meta's adding or delivering to the right ad sets and the right ads. The other decision is adding more ad sets. And so what this means is like, great, you have a bunch of concepts that are working. What needs to happen in order for you to keep testing this process so that you can keep doing this in a scalable format, right? Like you don't just want to increase your spend and that's it, and then you're stuck. You don't have a scalable way to test different concepts. And so here, what you're able to do is say you have these 5 ad sets, you simply add more ad sets in that same CBO campaign with that same minimum spend. And now that campaign goes from $1,000 a day to $1,600 a day, assuming you don't spend or scale at all. These are the positive scenarios. The other scenarios, of course, is you turn off ad sets that aren't working. It reallocates to your minimum spend of the ad sets plus wherever else that there's opportunity to scale, and you increase ad set minimums. If you want to make sure that specific ad sets that get more spend, if you're having issues with allocation of spend, or you remove ad set minimums and let Meta do its thing completely. So we just prefer minimums. We've had way more success with that, especially the cost to develop an asset is relatively high. And if you're spending $200, $500 on one asset to test, and then it doesn't get spent, that is a problem. If you believe that Meta just assumes that this doesn't work, this is not a good ad, then that's a methodology as well. We just prefer minimum spends. And so the next logical question is, well, how much should I be testing and how much can I test? And so what we did is we actually created a calculator based off of this, and I'm going to show you how to get access to this. And so we created scenarios of if you're spending 1,000 a day, 5,000 a day, 10,000 or beyond, how do you actually look at what are the inputs to decide of how many assets can you test per month? And so this comes down to how much you're spending per day on Meta. What is your testing percentage that you want to allocate? And so, for example, if your whole account is failing, your whole account isn't testing. This is a very important nuance that took a long time at times for us, which is like, especially in the early days, which is like, how much should we test? Well, if you're not hitting budgets, everything is testing. But usually what we recommend is 20% of your budget dedicated to testing. If you're doing incredibly well and you just don't need to test that much, you can reduce that further. We usually suggest 20%. What is your target CPA and what is your daily budget? And so that's what we're going to go into right now. And so this is the calculator, and I'm going to show you how to get it here shortly. All you have to do is put in your numbers of everything that's blue. So you'll see daily spend here is $5,000. That means there's $150,000 a month of spend. Your testing budget could be 20%. Again, this is the similar thing of what I mentioned. If everything's not working, then you're 100%. If it's struggling or things are going the wrong direction, you can do the 30 to 40% of your account is in testing. In this example, with $5,000 per day, 20% testing budget, that means that you're spending $1,000 a day per test. Now, if you have a $100 CPA, you have to decide of what your multiplier is of your target CPA in terms of your budget per test. Some people are very aggressive. They say, I want to give a test 3 days and I only do 1x target CPA. If it doesn't work, if it doesn't perform in 3 days, gone, next, and move on. So we prefer at least 2x target CPA, depending on the CPA target. The lower the CPA target, the higher the multiplier. So for example, if you have a $20 target CPA, you can afford 3x, 4x, 5x your target CPA per test per day. And so in this example, you have a $100 CPA, 2x multiplier, you're spending $200 per day per test for 7 days. And so in this case, because you're spending $5,000 per day total, 20% of your budget is on testing. That means you're spending $1,000 a day on testing. Your target CPA is $100 and your budget per test is 2x your multiplier. So that means you have $200 per day per test. And that means that you can run 5 tests per week or 20 per month. What happens here usually is a wake-up call for a lot of brands that we work with, because they're like, well, I'm just not even producing 20 concepts a month right now. And so that is meant to align your growth team with your creative team of what is your capacity from a testing standpoint. Then you can look at what is your capacity from a creative standpoint, from a production perspective of how much can you produce, who do you need to hire or adjust or fire in order to make sure you're meeting your quotas. Where this gets interesting is, of course, when this scales. And so on the following tab, what will happen is if you are at 10,000 per day in spend, you'll see, assuming the same like the calculations, you can test 10 concepts a week, and that means 40 concepts a month. And so if you have each concept has 4 variation, that means you can test 160 assets a month. So when we do this process, I think it's important to set a target that's reasonable for you, reasonable based off of your spend, and what is realistic for your creative team. And so that's how we go about the testing process. If you want this calculator, DM calculator to me on Instagram, subscribe and like this video for more, and I will see you guys on the next one.